Alina stood in front of her bedroom mirror, turning slightly to the side to check the fit of her deep emerald dress. The silky fabric hugged her figure perfectly, the color setting off the warm glow in her skin. She brushed a final sweep of lip gloss over her mouth, telling herself tonight would be different. Tonight, Beau would notice her. Tonight, maybe they'd actually have a full dinner without his phone buzzing every 5 minutes. Her phone buzzed on the vanity. "Hey, girl," Kiani's voice crackled through the speaker. "You sound all dressed up, big date night?" Alina gave a soft laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, if he shows. But, I can't keep doing this. Every time I get excited, every time I think he'll keep his word, it's the same thing. A text, a phone call, an emergency meeting." She sat on the edge of the bed, absently smoothing her dress. "I've been patient for 2 years. I've stood by him through every late night, every broken plan, because I believed we were building something together. But maybe he's only building for himself." "You deserve more than crumbs, Lena," Kiani said firmly. "A man can't be too busy for the person he loves. You're not some afterthought." Alina swallowed, forcing brightness into her voice. "Let's just see what happens tonight." She hung up before her resolve could crack. The restaurant smelled faintly of rosemary and grilled steak, candles flickering on every table. Alina sat alone at a corner booth, her coat draped neatly beside her, her phone lying face up. The waiter refilled her wine glass with a practiced smile, but she could see the pity in his eyes. Her phone lit up. "Beau." She snatched it up, her pulse quickening, until she heard his voice. "Lena, I'm sorry. The deal's running late. We'll do this tomorrow, I promise." She stared at the empty seat across from her, her hand tightening around the phone. "You promised me that last week and the week before." "I know, baby, but this is big. This expansion could change everything for us." She let out a humorless laugh. "Everything for us or everything for you?" There was a pause. "I'll make it up to you." "Sure you will," she said quietly, hanging up before he could respond. She set the phone down, staring at the flickering candle. The plate in front of her was still untouched. Outside, rain streaked down the restaurant's wide glass windows, blurring the lights of the city. A perfect reflection of the life she was beginning to see more clearly. Beautiful on the outside, but lonely when you looked too close. Alina swiped her keycard against the elevator panel, the quiet hum of the ride to the top floor doing nothing to calm her. She rehearsed her words in her head, but they tangled together, heavy with the weight of too many letdowns. When the doors opened into Beau's penthouse, the scent of expensive cologne and faint cigar smoke greeted her. And the sight of him, still in his tailored suit, pacing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows with his Bluetooth pressed to his ear. He gave her a distracted smile, holding up one finger before turning his back to continue his conversation. Alina's heels clicked against the marble floor as she crossed to the living room, dropping her clutch onto the couch with a deliberate thud. He finally ended the call and exhaled. "Lena, I'm sorry about tonight." "Don't," she cut in sharply. "Don't say you're sorry unless you mean it's going to change. I sat at that table for almost an hour tonight, Beau, and it's not the first time. I'm starting to think you only remember me when it's convenient." Beau ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "I told you, this deal is important." "Yes, I know. Every deal is important. Every expansion, every contract, every just one more week. Do you even hear yourself?" His jaw tightened. "I'm doing this for us, for the life we talked about." "Beau, the life we talked about doesn't exist if I'm not in it." Her voice wavered, but she didn't look away. "I don't need penthouses and designer bags. I need someone who shows up for me. Right now, that's not you." He stepped closer, his expression softening. "Just a little more time. After this contract closes, after the expansion in Miami, things will settle down, I swear." She shook her head, her chest aching. "You've been saying after for 2 years. I'm tired of living in the waiting room of your life." For a moment, they stood in silence, the city lights flickering between them through the glass. Beau reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "I don't want promises, Beau," she whispered. "I want presence, and I'm not sure you know how to give that." The rain came down in sheets that Friday evening, blurring the skyline outside Beau's penthouse. Alina sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. Her hair was done, her dress hung perfectly, and her phone lay silent beside her. At 7:42 p.m., it buzzed. "Beau," she answered without greeting him. "Lina, I'm stuck at the office." She laughed bitterly, interrupting. "Of course you are. This one's different. I can't just walk out." "Beau, it's always different. It's always urgent. And somehow it's always more important than me." He sighed. "We can reschedule for tomorrow. I'll make it up to you." Her fingers curled into the comforter. "You can't keep making it up to me, Beau. You can only show up or not. And I think we both know which one it is." Silence. Then, "Lina, I'm done." The words felt like steel in her mouth, sharp and irreversible. She stood grabbing her coat from the chair. The elevator ride down was slow, each floor a quiet goodbye to the pieces of her life she'd built here. The shared mornings that never came, the dinners that always got canceled, the conversations that died under the weight of his ambition. When she stepped out into the lobby, Beau was there. He must have left the office the second she hung up. His shirt was damp from the rain, his hair disheveled, but his expression was unreadable. "You're leaving?" "Yes," she didn't waver. "And I'm not coming back." He took a half step forward, then stopped. "If you walk out, you're giving up on us." Her voice was steady, but her heart was breaking. "No, Beau, you gave up a long time ago. You just didn't notice." For a moment she thought he might fight for her, but his jaw clenched, his gaze dropping to the polished floor. "Do what you think you need to do." She walked past him, the click of her heels swallowed by the rain outside. Through the glass doors, she saw his reflection watching her go. Still, silent, and unwilling to follow. On the curb, she raised her hand for a cab, the city lights blurred with the rain on her lashes. When the taxi pulled away, she didn't look back. She wouldn't survive another promise. Inside, Beau stood in the empty lobby for a long time, telling himself he was doing the right thing. That if she couldn't understand now, she would someday. But deep down, the quiet truth was already there. She wouldn't be waiting when that day came. Beau threw himself into work with a vengeance after Alina left. If anyone at Anderson Holdings noticed the change, they didn't say it aloud, but they saw it in the way he buried himself in endless meetings, traveling from city to city without pause. His penthouse stayed immaculate. Not because he took care of it, but because no one lived there anymore. He told himself it was for the best. She had wanted more than he could give, and he had wanted more than she could wait for. Still, at night, when the skyline glittered outside his window, he would catch himself glancing toward the spot on the sofa where she used to curl up with a book, or the kitchen counter where she'd leave him little notes before early flights. He kept those notes in a drawer. He never read them, but he couldn't throw them away. It was Kiani who finally coaxed Alina into a blind date 6 months later. "He's a good one," he promised over brunch. "Self-made, charming, owns a chain of boutique hotels. But more importantly, he shows up." Alina laughed, skeptical, but willing to try. When she met Weston Hale at a rooftop restaurant downtown, the first thing she noticed was that he stood to greet her, phone already out of sight. His handshake was warm, his smile genuine. "You're even lovelier than Kiani said," he told her, not in the slick, performative way she'd grown used to, but with a sincerity that made her cheeks warm. Over dinner, he asked questions and actually listened. He didn't rush her answers, didn't glance at the entrance when someone important walked in. When dessert came, he slid his phone across the table to show her photos, not of his hotels or awards, but of his rescue dog, Cooper, grinning with his tongue hanging out. When the evening ended, he walked her to her car under the soft glow of the streetlights. "I'd like to see you again," he said. And somehow, she believed he meant it. Their romance unfolded differently than any relationship Alina had known. Weston planned thoughtful little surprises, her favorite coffee waiting outside her yoga class, a playlist he made for her commute, flowers sent just because it's Tuesday. When they were together, he kept his phone on silent. If someone from his business called, he'd say, "I'm with Alina, I'll call you back," without hesitation. It wasn't perfect. She still had moments where she hesitated to believe it could last. Some part of her braced for the letdown, for the canceled plans. But each time doubt crept in, Weston proved her wrong. When she was stressed, he didn't tell her to calm down. He asked, "How can I help?" When she shared her dreams, he didn't just nod. He offered to introduce her to people who could make them happen. For the first time in years, Alina began to believe she wasn't asking for too much. She was just asking the wrong person before. Beau had seen their photo before. It had been splashed across a lifestyle magazine's online column. Weston Hale, the rising star of the hospitality industry, spotted with a mystery woman at a charity gala. She wasn't a mystery to him. Even in the grainy shot, Alina's laugh was unmistakable. He'd stared at it longer than he should have, then shoved the thought aside like he always did. It wasn't as if he hadn't been introduced to other women since she left. His colleagues, friends, even his mother had nudged him toward potential matches. Ambitious women with polished smiles and family pedigrees. He went on a few dates. Dinners were pleasant enough, conversations safe and predictable. But no one looked at him the way Alina used to. Still, Beau told himself he was fine. Work was thriving. The expansion in Miami had launched ahead of schedule, and investors were eager for the next project. Relationships could wait. They always had. The industry conference was buzzing with energy, the ballroom lined with company banners, the air thick with the scent of fresh coffee and cologne. Beau had just stepped off stage after a panel discussion when he saw her. Alina. She stood across the room, her hair swept elegantly to one side, a soft gold dress skimming her frame. She was laughing at something Weston said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Weston's attention was entirely on her, his stance protective. His smile wide. Beau felt the familiar tug in his chest, a reminder of the quiet moments he'd let slip away. Before he could stop himself, his eyes lingered too long. Alina noticed. Their gazes locked for half a second before she quickly looked away, the laughter fading from her lips. She turned slightly, angling herself toward Weston, her posture tense. Weston's brow furrowed. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She gave a small nod. "Yeah, I just saw someone I wasn't expecting to." He studied her. "Your ex?" She hesitated, then exhaled. "Yes, Beau. We ended on complicated terms. I'm not ready to face him yet." Weston's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't press. "Then we don't have to. Let's get some air." They slipped out a side exit into the hotel's rooftop lounge, where the city stretched out in glittering layers beneath the night sky. The wind was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. Weston guided her toward a quieter corner, away from the chatter. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to," he said gently, resting his arm along the back of her chair. Alina looked out at the skyline, her hands curled in her lap. "We were together for 2 years. I spent most of that time waiting for him to put me first. Every time I asked for more time together, he'd promise me after the next deal, after the expansion. I believed him, until I didn't anymore." Weston nodded slowly. "And he just let you walk away?" Her lips pressed together. "He didn't chase me. I think that hurt more than all the canceled dinners." For a moment they sat in quiet. Then Weston leaned back, his gaze drifting over the city. "My last relationship was different, but it ended the same way, disappointment. She didn't love me. She loved what I could give her. The trips, the hotels, the introductions. Once she realized she'd taken all she could, she was gone." Alina turned to look at him, surprised by the honesty in his tone. "That must have been hard." He gave a small shrug. "It was. But I've seen what the real thing looks like. My grandparents, they were married 52 years. They held hands in the grocery store. They laughed like teenagers. They worked through things instead of walking away. That's what I want. That's what I'm holding out for." Alina's throat tightened. She hadn't dared to hope for something that solid in a long time. "I want that too," she admitted. "But I'm still learning how to trust it. How to believe it's possible." Weston reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers without forcing it. "Then I'll wait. I'm not here to rush you. I just want to be the man you can count on. Even if it takes time for you to believe that." Her eyes softened. "Be patient with me?" He smiled, squeezing her hand. "Always." They sat like that for a while, the city lights flickering below, the hum of the conference fading behind them. Inside, Beau remained in the ballroom, his mind not on the next networking opportunity, but on the woman who had just walked out of his line of sight again. This time, with someone who didn't look like he'd ever let her go. The conference had wound down hours ago. The ballroom lights were dimmed, and most of the guests had retreated to their rooms or to the hotel bar. Alina had slipped back inside after her rooftop talk with Weston to grab a bottle of water from the lobby cafe before heading upstairs. She was halfway across the marble floor when she heard her name. Alina. The sound of his voice stopped her cold. She turned slowly to find Beau standing near one of the tall columns, his suit jacket off, tie loosened. There was something in his expression she'd never seen before. Not pride, not charm, but a quiet weariness. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low. She hesitated, then nodded toward a quieter corner, where a few empty lounge chairs faced the darkened windows. They sat, the city lights reflecting off the glass behind them. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Beau exhaled. "I've replayed the night you left 100 times. Every time, I think I should have followed you. I should have stopped you at the door." Alina folded her hands in her lap, keeping her gaze steady. "But you didn't." His eyes flickered with regret. "No. I told myself you'd come back, that you just needed space. The truth is, I took you for granted. I thought you'd always be there, waiting through the deals, the late nights, the empty promises." He gave a humorless laugh. "I was wrong." She swallowed, her voice steady. "And I waited too long for you to choose me. I kept telling myself you just needed one more deal, one more expansion, before you'd see me. But every time, it was the same answer. After." She drew in a slow breath. "Now I have someone who is willing to give me everything I begged from you without me asking." Beau's jaw tightened, but his voice was soft. "Tell me, Alina, has he made you forget me?" Her lips curved in a sad smile. "No, but he's showing me how it should have been, and I'm not willing to go back to begging for scraps." She tilted her head, meeting his eyes directly. "Tell me, Beau, have you changed?" The pause was long enough for her to hear the faint hum of the air conditioning, the muted chatter from the far end of the lobby. "No," he said finally, his voice low and raw. "If anything, I'm worse because you're gone. I thought I could live without you, but I can't stop seeing you in every empty chair across the table, every glass of wine poured for one." Her chest ached, but she didn't look away. "Then I hope one day you're fulfilled. I hope you find something, someone, that makes you put the phone down and actually be there. I hope you find happiness, Beau." He nodded, his throat working. "And I hope he's everything I wasn't." A quiet settled between them. There was nothing near to be said, no way to bridge the years of missed moments and misplaced priorities. Alina stood first, adjusting the strap of her bag over her shoulder. "Good night, Beau." He stayed seated, his hands clasped between his knees, watching her walk toward the elevators. She didn't look back. When the elevator doors closed behind her, Beau leaned back in the chair, staring out at the city. The lights blurred slightly, though whether from exhaustion or the sting in his eyes, he couldn't say. For the first time, there was no deal waiting, no meeting to rush to, just the empty space where she used to be. The next evening, Alina sat curled on the edge of Weston's sofa, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea he'd made her. He was watching her closely, the way he always did when he knew she had something on her mind. "I saw Beau last night," she said finally. Weston didn't flinch, but his hand paused mid-reach for his own cup. "You talked to him?" She nodded. "We sat down in the lobby after the conference. It wasn't long, but it was honest. He admitted he took me for granted. I told him I'd waited too long for him to choose me." She exhaled slowly, staring into the steam curling from her cup. It was closure, but it still stirred things up. Weston's voice was careful. "Are you pulling away from me?" Her lips softened into a faint smile. "No, I'm not pulling away. But I do need some space. Not from you, from everything. I need time with Tiani. She's been through every chapter of my life, and I think I need her to help me bury this for good." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, Take the time you need. I'll be here when you get back." 2 days later, Alina and Tiani were on the highway, the city shrinking behind them as the open road stretched ahead. Tiani had insisted on driving, her playlist humming through the speakers, a mix of old R&B and soft acoustic songs. They didn't talk about Beau at first. Instead, they sang along to throwback hits, stopped for diner coffee, and laughed until their stomachs hurt. But by the time they reached the small coastal town where they booked a weekend cabin, the quiet between songs started to feel heavier. That night, sitting on the porch with the sound of waves crashing in the distance, Alina finally let the memories spill out. She told Kiani about the dinners alone, the empty promises, the way Beau's eyes had looked when he admitted he hadn't changed. "I thought walking away was the hard part," Alina said softly. "But the truth is, I've still been carrying him with me. Even with Weston, a little piece of me was waiting for Beau to prove me wrong." Kiani reached over, squeezing her hand. "Then maybe this weekend is where you put that piece down. You can't build your future with one hand still holding your past." Alina closed her eyes, breathing in the salt air, and for the first time, she didn't feel anger. She didn't even feel longing. She felt tired enough to let go. When the weekend ended, she left her phone untouched until they were halfway home. She hadn't texted Weston, hadn't checked her email. She'd needed that silence to grieve Beau one last time. Not the man he was, but the version she'd believed in for too long. As the skyline reappeared in the distance, Alina felt lighter. The past was no longer something she was waiting to fix. It was just behind her. The weekend away with Kiani had left Alina both emotionally drained and strangely light, as if she had set down a weight she'd been carrying for years. Somewhere between the long coastal walks and the quiet conversations on the porch, she had finally said goodbye to Beau, not just in words, but in her heart. As they neared the city, she texted Weston, "Be home in a half hour." His reply came quickly. "Yours or mine's?" "Yours," she typed, smiling at the thought of him waiting there. When she pulled into his driveway, Weston was already standing at the front door, hands tucked in his pockets, his eyes tracking her every step up the walkway. The second she reached him, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, slow, steady, like he had nowhere else to be and no reason to rush. When he finally drew back, his gaze swept over her face. "You look different," he said softly, searching her eyes. Alina felt the words tumble out before she could stop them. "That's because I'm free to love you now." The moment hung in the air between them. Her breath caught, realizing what she'd just confessed. She opened her mouth to apologize, but Weston stopped her with a shake of his head. "Don't," he said firmly, his voice warm but sure. "I think we're both free to love each other now." The truth in his words landed deep, and a smile broke across her face, wide, unrestrained, the kind she hadn't worn in years. She felt his hand settle at her waist, steady and grounding, and before she knew it, they were kissing again, this time with a quiet joy neither of them needed to name. When they finally stepped inside, she noticed the small details. Her favorite wine already on the counter, a throw blanket draped over the sofa, the faint scent of something sweet baking in the oven. Weston had always made space for her in his home, but tonight it felt like her place too. As they curled up on the couch, his arm around her shoulders, Alina leaned into him with the quiet certainty that this, being seen, being chosen, being loved without conditions, was what she'd been waiting for all along. And now, she was ready to receive it. The months that followed their moment at the front door were not without storms. Alina and Weston settled into a rhythm, shared breakfasts when their schedules allowed, late-night talks on his balcony, weekend getaways to quiet places. They were building something steady, something real, but it wasn't easy. Weston's mother, Sylvia Hale, was quick to voice her reservations. "She's not a socialite, Weston," Sylvia said one afternoon over lunch, her manicured fingers curling around a crystal glass. "She's pleasant, but she's not our circle. She won't understand the pressures that come with your position." Weston had simply leaned back in his chair, his tone calm but unyielding. "Mother, I don't need someone from my circle. I need someone who makes me want to come home at the end of the day. That's Alina. Alina didn't hear the conversation until much later, but she saw the effects of Sylvia's disapproval in small ways. The frosty smiles at charity dinners, the polite but pointed remarks about fitting in. It stung, but she never let it drive a wedge between her and Weston. Public events brought their own set of challenges. The hospitality industry was filled with well-connected socialites, many of whom had known Weston for years, and some who weren't shy about making their interest obvious. At a gala in midwinter, one particularly bold woman in a shimmering silver gown had all but draped herself across Weston's arm, laughing at some shared memory while ignoring Alina entirely. Weston's hand, however, never left the small of Alina's back. When the woman tried to steer him toward the dance floor, Weston gave a polite smile and said, "I'm here with my fiancée-to-be. If I dance tonight, it'll be with her." He didn't wait for a reaction. He simply turned to Alina and held out his hand. The pride in his eyes as they swayed across the floor was all the reassurance she needed. Time and again, he made it clear. Alina was part of him, and she wasn't going anywhere. After a year, their relationship had deepened in ways that went beyond the grand gestures. They had learned each other's quiet habits, how she liked her coffee with just a splash of oat milk, how he hummed under his breath when he was focused. They had weathered disagreements, celebrated small wins, and carved out a space that belonged entirely to them. On a breezy spring evening, Weston drove Alina to the same rooftop restaurant where they'd had their first date. The city skyline glowed beneath them, just as it had that night. But this time, the moment carried the weight of all the memories they had built together. Dinner was unhurried, filled with laughter and quiet touches. As dessert plates were cleared away, Weston reached into his jacket pocket and stood. "Alina," he began, his voice steady but warm, "the first time I brought you here, I knew there was something about you I didn't want to let go of. Over the past year, you've shown me that love isn't about appearances or pedigrees. It's about showing up every day, no matter what." Her breath caught as he dropped to one knee. A small velvet box appeared in his hand, and when he opened it, the diamond inside caught the city lights like it had been waiting for this very moment. "I want to keep showing up for you, for the rest of my life," Weston said, his eyes locked on hers. "Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision as she nodded. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The restaurant erupted in applause, but all Alina heard was the pounding of her own heart and the steady promise in Weston's smile. This time, she thought, she hadn't been someone's afterthought. She was his choice from the very beginning. Beau hadn't looked at the date intentionally. He'd seen the news weeks ago, the press release for a high-profile society wedding at the Hale family's estate. But he hadn't needed to read the names. He already knew. That morning, he found himself standing in his penthouse, coffee cooling in his hand, staring out at the city. The day was bright, the kind of perfect weather people prayed for on wedding days. He told himself he wasn't going. That would have been inappropriate, disrespectful. But part of him imagined what it would be like to see her walk down the aisle, not toward him, but toward the man who had done everything Beau hadn't. Around noon, his phone buzzed with a news notification. Against his better judgment, he opened it. There she was. Alina stood in the center of the photograph, radiant in a lace gown that seemed made for her. Weston was beside her, his hand resting at her waist, his head tipped toward hers, with a smile that could only belong to a man who knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. The caption spoke of a beautiful union between hospitality mogul Weston Hale and Alina White. But Beau didn't need the words to know the truth. She was happy. He leaned back in his chair, the image still open on the screen. He remembered the countless times she'd sat across from him, waiting for him to put down his phone. The nights she'd asked for more time, more presence, more as him, and how easily he'd told her, after the next deal, after the expansion. But the moment she'd needed him to choose her, he hadn't. And now, looking at the joy on her face, Beau felt the hollow ache of realization. Weston had given her the things Beau always thought he'd get around to giving: time, attention, priority. The difference was, Weston hadn't made her wait. For a long while, Beau just sat there, staring at the photograph. The city moved on around him, horns honking, distant sirens, the hum of life. But inside, he was still. Finally, he closed the article, set the phone face down, and whispered to the empty room, "I missed my moment." It wasn't bitter or angry, just true. Somewhere across the city, she was beginning the rest of her life. And he would keep building his empire, knowing there was one thing in this world he couldn't buy back. Hope you enjoyed this story by Green Tea Tales. Support our channel with comments, likes, and subscribe. Thank you.